This is Al Jazeera.
Hello, I'm Mariam Namazi. You're watching the NewsHour live from London. Coming up in the next 60 minutes. Cleared to fly, Russian doctors say opposition leader Alexei Navalny can be moved to Germany for medical treatment. A new ceasefire is announced by Libya's UN-recognized government, and it has the backing of its rivals in the east. Far from world-class hospitals in major cities, Americans in towns on the southern border are suffering the worst from COVID-19. And past the point of no return, 2019 saw a record melt on Greenland's ice sheet with irreversible consequences for the global sea level.
And I'm Peter Stemmett in Doha with your sport. We've got another European football thriller. It's Cool Hand Luke with a double strike, helping Sevilla extend their record run of Europa League titles.
Hello, welcome to the NewsHour. Russian doctors treating one of the Kremlin's biggest critics have agreed to let him fly to Germany for medical treatment. The doctors in Siberia backed down after initially insisting Alexei Navalny was too unwell to be moved. The opposition leader collapsed on a plane on Thursday after drinking a cup of tea that his aides believe was laced with poison. Navalny's supporters accused Russian authorities of trying to stop his evacuation. Rory Challens reports.
What's going on inside this regional Russian hospital is only slightly clearer than what's going on inside the body of its most famous patient. With a plane waiting in Omsk to take an unconscious Alexei Navalny to Germany, doctors spent most of the day saying he was too sick to move. Then, late on Friday, a change of position.
Relatives, the wife and the brother of the patient, who are fully immersed and have all the data about the diagnosis and condition of the patient, are ready to take the risks. We have decided not to oppose transferring the patient to another clinic.
It's expected that Navalny will be taken to the airport and flown to Berlin. Earlier, the opposition leader's spokeswoman and another aide struggled to speak to the German doctors who'd just been in to see Navalny.
A moment ago, with the use of force, Yulia wasn't allowed to meet with German doctors. As you saw, they pushed me away, just like they pushed her away. She's the wife and has a full right to know everything about Alexei's condition. She has the full right to speak to German doctors, who should transport him from this to a normal hospital as soon as possible.
Navalny's wife, Yulia, suspects the delay in releasing him is so any poisons in his system will be harder to detect.
The situation is outrageous. Authorities won't give Alexei to us. We think it's obvious that something is hidden from us.
But the allegation that Navalny drank poisoned tea in a cafe at Tomsk airport before boarding a flight to Moscow is being denied by the Omsk hospital medics.
We have come to the conclusion that, judging by the fact that there were no poisons found in his blood or other biological materials, he has a metabolic disorder, lowering of the blood sugar levels to be specific, due to a rapid change of pressure. Everyone thinks it was during takeoff.
When he arrives in Germany, tests and treatment given to Navalny will confirm whether doctors outside Russia share this opinion. But in Moscow, St. Petersburg and other cities, Navalny supporters have been gathering and getting detained. Putin, stop poisoning people, says this placard. Navalny, live, says another. Like the opposition leader's closest aides, they're convinced this was an attempt on Navalny's life and that Vladimir Putin is to blame. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera.
Well, Jaka Bizil is from the charity organising Alexei Navalny's flight to Berlin and says his safety is the first priority.
Our mission is a humanitarian mission, bringing a plane, making sure that he can come safely to Berlin and get his treatment. All the speculations about poisoning and political backgrounds is not really our business. Obviously, the charity is famous for doing a very good job in trying to save such people, and obviously also to find out what kind of substances are involved. So we will see what the charity will actually define and find out. For us personally, on my side, it was very important to have good German medics with us who actually checked if he's able to fly, nevertheless that he is unconscious, that he's on ventilation, and they came to the conclusion, in difference to the Russian doctors, that he can fly and we will fly.
Well, Dominic Kane is in Berlin for us and says the hospital that Alexei Navalny is going to is one of the best equipped to treat his condition.
When Alexei Navalny arrives in Berlin, it is to this hospital, the Charité hospital in the center of the city, that he will be brought, a world-renowned institution of long standing that has relevant, direct, recent experience of treating patients who present with similar symptoms, similar conditions to those we understand Mr. Navalny has been suffering from since his ordeal began on that flight in Siberia. The point here is that the organization which has sourced his medical evacuation flight is the same organization that sourced a similar flight for another critic of the government of Vladimir Putin in Moscow a few years ago. That time, that person, who is an associate of the Pussy Riot group, was brought here by the Cinema for Peace Foundation. They are the ones sourcing Mr. Navalny's flight as well. And they believe that Mr. Navalny has been the victim of a poisoning, and that goes against what has been said from the Russian doctor's perspective, but they believe that they will be vindicated, and that when the officials in the Charité hospital get to treat Mr. Navalny, that they will find what his side of the story believes is the case. They say he's been poisoned. We wait to see what will happen when Mr. Navalny arrives at the hospital.
Anna Borchevskaya is Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and joins us now from the US. First of all, what do you make of France and particularly Germany's involvement now?
Well, I think, there are a lot of unanswered questions here. This goes to the issue of U.S.-Russian relations and Russia's relations with the West as well, and also about just figuring out the truth. This isn't the first Putin critic who has been poisoned. Now, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, but there's a pattern, a clear pattern of Putin critics being poisoned whenever they present a danger to the Kremlin regime. And certainly the timing of this incident, especially in the context of protests in Belarus, is quite significant.
Why?
It's very important because Putin fears popular uprisings. We know this historically. He is always afraid of so-called color revolutions. He believes they're sponsored by the United States. He said the same thing about the Arab Spring, and we're now seeing unprecedented protests very close to home in Belarus. So if they can overthrow,
all that going on, isn't it a strange time to have allegedly orchestrated something like this?
Well, look, Navalny has risen as a very strong voice, and for for a leader who is afraid of popular uprising, his word could potentially spark another uprising, and that's something that worries Putin.
But if people perceive that he's been deliberately poisoned, and should his condition get worse, or should he even die from this, that could cause even more problems for the Kremlin.
It could. Sure it could. And again, this is a pattern that keeps repeating. But I think it highlights how sort of where the Kremlin's priorities lie, and that is in silencing opposition voices.
Is it plausible that an opposition leader who is as outspoken and well known as Alexei Navalny might have enemies outside of the Kremlin?
It's possible, and again, there's a lot we don't know, but there's a pattern of behavior. Everything about this incident just looks very suspicious, and the fact that doctors had, up until most recently, resisted transferring him to a better hospital, there's just a lot of questions to be asked here.
What do you envisage might happen after he goes to Germany? He's obviously there for treatment, and it depends on how his condition develops, and obviously that the hope is that he will get better and he will recover from this. But how soon might he return to Russia, do you think?
This I think depends on his health condition, and I'm certainly not a doctor. I'm not in the position to comment on that. But there's also the issue of, certain poisons can't be detected after some amount of time has passed. So the delay in allowing him to go to Germany might have something to do with that.
So how do you think the investigation will play out then? Do you think that it will be possible to establish whether he was poisoned, and if so, what kind of substance was used?
Again, we don't really know. I think at this stage, we'd have to wait and see what happens once he gets transferred to the German hospital. Certainly, this incident brings back memories of poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko, and in that case, he was treated by British doctors, and they did establish a case of poisoning, obviously a different case. But we'll have to wait and see at this point.
Thank you, Anna Borchevskaya.
Thank you very much.
We were mentioning Belarus there, and the exiled Belarusian opposition leader has been calling for more mass protests against President Alexander Lukashenko. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya is leading the call for his resignation. There have been demonstrations for 12 straight days, including some of the biggest anti-government rallies in the capital Minsk since the fall of the Soviet Union. Tikhanovskaya fled to Lithuania for her safety after the election, which she says was rigged against her.
The future of Belarus, and therefore the future of our children, now depends on your unity and your determination. So I ask you, go on and expand the strikes. Don't be fooled by intimidation. Unite. We will make the authorities hide in their palaces to hear our voices, which they stole from us. Our goals are simple. Stop the violence, free the political prisoners, hold transparent, free and fair elections. Together we are strong, a force that no dictatorship can withstand.
You're watching the NewsHour live from London. More still ahead.
This sacred duty is my #1 priority between now and Election Day.
The man at the center of the U.S. mail-in voting controversy tells a Senate committee that ballots will be delivered securely and on time. Turkey finds a massive natural gas reserve in the Black Sea, a discovery which could dramatically reduce the country's dependence on energy imports. And then a bit later in the programme in sport, Manchester United's captain is arrested after a holiday brawl. We'll have the details coming up with Peter. Some hope of respite in Libya's civil war. The internationally recognised government in Tripoli has declared a ceasefire. It's also been backed by a rival parliament in the east. In terms of how the country has been divided, the UN-backed government controls this area in blue. It's headquartered in Tripoli. And then warlord Khalifa Haftar, who's allied with the Eastern Parliament in Tobruk, controls the part in red. Both sides were gearing up for a battle over the city of Sirte, the gateway to Libya's prized oil fields. There are now proposals to jointly demilitarize the area along with the Al Jufra airbase in the south. Crucially, Sirte is controlled by forces loyal to Haftar, who've imposed an oil blockade since January, causing around $8 billion in losses. The ceasefire calls for production to resume, and it wants elections to take place in March, as long as Libyans can agree on a constitutional basis for it. Charles Stratford looks back at the recent conflict.
Libya has been in turmoil for nearly a decade. NATO-backed forces overthrew its long-time leader, Muammar Gaddafi, in 2011. But the roots of what's often described as this oil-rich country's civil war started after the disputed elections in 2014. Disagreement between the then House of Representatives and the General National Congress were made worse over a so-called roadmap for Libya's future. The country split into two rival administrations. The House of Representatives, led by the warlord Khalifa Haftar, moved to the eastern city of Tobruk, and what became the UN-backed Government of National Accord, led by Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, remained in the capital Tripoli in the west. Thousands of people have been killed and many more forced to flee their homes in the 6.5 years of fighting. The UN accuses regional powers of repeatedly breaking a 2011 arms embargo on Libya by supplying weapons to both sides. Egypt, the UAE and Russia have supported Haftar, while Turkey and Qatar have backed the government of national accord. In April last year, Haftar ordered an offensive to take control of Tripoli, aiming at what he described as cleansing the western zone of terrorist groups. His forces have shut down or taken control of major oil facilities in eastern Libya, depriving the country of billions of dollars in revenue. Tripoli's only international airport has been repeatedly bombed using heavy artillery. Many civilians have been killed and wounded. Large areas of southern and western Tripoli have been almost completely destroyed in the fighting. Repeated attempts at UN-backed ceasefire talks have failed.
A ceasefire is a decision made by the power brokers, by the circumstances, and it is not necessarily a Libyan decision, despite the fact that it's the GNA and Tobruk who announced this decision. This time the decision is not Libyan. The decision is uniquely Turkish, Russia, with some input from some of the international powers. And as long as it stays that way, it's unlikely the ceasefire will break.
Friday's ceasefire announcement comes amid fears of an escalation by both sides mobilizing for a battle over the town of Sirte, the gateway to the major oil terminals which are under the control of pro-Haftar forces. For now, at least, there's hope that agreements between powerful countries that many say have contributed to Libya's suffering are backing a ceasefire that could end its civil war. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
Thousands of opposition supporters are celebrating in Mali's capital, Bamako, days after the government was toppled in a military coup. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta announced his resignation after soldiers detained him on Tuesday. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, has closed its borders with Mali and is sending a delegation on Saturday to discuss the country's political future. Ahmed Idris is following the story from Nigeria's capital, Abuja, where ECOWAS is headquartered, and he explains how the Malian military will want to handle this visit from the West African bloc.
I'm sure by the time the ECOWAS delegation arrives Mali or Bamako tomorrow, they will want to show them that the people are with the new military leaders. They want to inform them that it was a necessity that the army intervened. Of course, the narrative now is that they did not intervene. Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta left, and so they wanted to fill up a vacuum so as to stay the course of the country. But what is important for them is that they want as much as they can to show to the rest of the world that they still have been accepted by majority of Malians, and of course they want to use it as a bargaining chip for whatever sanctions that may come their way, especially now that the West African Power Bloc or the Economic Community of West African States slapped some sanctions on Mali that include cutting financial flows, imposing land and air blockade on Mali, as well as introducing some sanctions apart from, of course, at their summit yesterday, they exempted food and medical supplies from those sanctions. So they wanted to use this as an evidence to show that Malians are in support of what they're saying, and that removing Boubacar Keïta was necessary to right the wrongs in Mali, from the elections to the security challenges in the north and central parts of the country.
The head of the US Postal Service says mail-in votes will be delivered securely and on time for November's election. Louis DeJoyce faced criticism for cost-cutting plans, which could have meant votes would miss polling day, but has since made a U-turn. He's now told the Senate committee he wasn't part of a bid by President Trump to suppress the vote. Heidi Jo Castro reports.
Committee will be the truth.
Calling the accusations against him outrageous, Louis DeJoyce says the cuts he's made to the U.S. Postal Service were long planned and aimed at making the agency financially solvent, not to complicate mail-in voting in November.
As we head into the election season, I want to assure this committee and the American public that the Postal Service is fully capable and committed to delivering the nation's election mail securely and on time.
That's a reversal from what the Postal Service said last month. In a warning to 46 states, the agency had cautioned that millions of ballots may not be delivered in time to be counted. Amidst the public fallout, DeJoy announced further cuts to the Postal Service will be postponed until after the election.
The Postal Service will deliver every ballot and process every ballot in time that it receives.
President Trump claims without evidence that voting by mail can lead to massive election fraud. That's despite voting by mail himself.
We're not prepared for this. 51 million ballots. It will be a tremendous embarrassment to our country. It'll go on forever, and you'll never know who won. So I say that for you. I say it for the cameras because I assume that goes out. But I will tell you that this is a very serious problem for a great democracy.
Democrats accuse Trump of trying to sow doubt in an election that polls show him currently losing.
We got a president who doesn't want to have a vote by mail. We got a president who'd like to suppress the vote. We got a president who would like to see the Postal Service not do well.
DeJoy was a Trump mega donor before becoming Postmaster General in June. A Postal Service board member resigned in protest, accusing the Trump administration of interfering with the independent agency. Now an internal watchdog is investigating, and 6 states are suing the Postal Service for harming their ability to hold free and fair elections. The House of Representatives will hold a rare Saturday session to take up legislation against the Postal Service changes, and DeJoy will face another day of grilling before a House panel on Monday. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Now to some news on the coronavirus. The pandemic has killed nearly 800,000 people, and the chief of the World Health Organization says he hopes it will end in less than 2 years. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says we now have better tools to fight COVID-19 compared to when the virus first broke out. But he also emphasized the importance of proper protection for those who are working on the front lines.
Any level of corruption is unacceptable, or any type of corruption is unacceptable. However, corruption related to PPE, life-saving, for me, it's actually a murder. Because if health workers work without PPE, we're risking their lives. And that also risks the lives of the people they serve.
Well, more than 600,000 people have contracted the virus in South Africa. It is the hardest hit country on the African continent, although the infection rate has been decreasing since the outbreak peaked in July. Nearly 13,000 people have died. That's around half of all fatalities in Africa. The government eased restrictions this week to help revive the economy after the pandemic pushed millions deeper into poverty. Lebanon has imposed a 2-week lockdown in a bid to contain a surge in infections there. The Ministry of Health is warning that hospitals are running out of space after 6 major hospitals and 20 clinics were damaged in the port explosion 2 weeks ago. Aid and relief workers will be allowed to continue under the partial lockdown measures. A report from the Associated Press news agency says the coronavirus death toll in the US might be far higher than the official count, and that people of color are disproportionately affected. As many as 215,000 more people died in the first 7 months of this year compared to the same period in 2019. But the official coronavirus death toll for that time was only around 150,000. Ethnic minorities form less than 40% of the American population, but account for more than half of the excess deaths. The AP says some coronavirus deaths were mistakenly attributed to other causes. Well, infection rates are soaring along the US border with Mexico. A combination of poverty and poor public health has put border communities at higher risk compared to other areas in the US. Rob Reynolds reports on this now from California.
Trying to stay one step ahead of death, Dr. Tien Vo pays a visit to one of his COVID-19 patients, Cynthia Reyes.
I can't catch my breath. It takes me a long time to get to the restroom. I feel like I'm going to faint.
Reyes' family has suffered greatly in the pandemic.
My dad passed away the 17th. My mother had coronavirus.
Reyes' mother, Margarita, says she hasn't even had time to grieve for her husband.
Everything that we've been through, it's a nightmare. So people need to take things like very seriously. This is something real.
Dr. Vo is on the front lines in Imperial County, California, a community on the U.S.-Mexico border and one of the hardest hit in the entire state. The COVID-19 positivity rate here is 3 times as high as in the rest of California.
We feel really, desperate. We need help. We need to get better.
far from the bigger and better equipped hospitals of major cities, doctors and nurses at Imperial County's main medical center struggle to cope with a stream of COVID-19 patients.
It is the perfect storm, and it includes things outside of our control. I tell people by the time you come to the ICU, it's kind of late for you.
Many people in this largely Latino border area have underlying health problems.
The community already had high rates of asthma and diabetes.
Recently, hundreds of people lined up at a local food bank to receive donations. Imperial County is the poorest place in California, with a per capita income of $17,500 in 2019, compared to the national per capita income of $45,000 a year. Unemployment is nearly 30%, and almost 1 in 4 people live below the poverty line.
This is a poor county, and if they could, send us help, that would be so great.
The state government has sent in extra medical teams and has transferred patients to other hospitals. Cynthia Reyes has a message for anyone who thinks the virus might disappear.
People don't think that it's real, and it is real.
Entrenched poverty, chronic illness, and a neglected public health infrastructure make Imperial County and other border communities from California to Texas a COVID killing zone. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera.
Well, virus experts are concerned the rollout of a Russian vaccine might encourage the coronavirus to mutate. Russian authorities say it's safe and effective, although full-scale trials have not been completed. Some scientists say they're worried that deploying a vaccine that's partially effective could actually cause the virus to evolve more quickly. While such mutations are rare, stronger vaccines give a virus less opportunity to learn how to evade antibody defenses. Still ahead on the NewsHour, a president who promised to wipe out corruption finds himself defending his own brother in a financial scandal. How South Korea's military is causing controversy for one of the world's most popular boy bands, and
He does drive on the up. What a moment for the young 22-year-old.
how's that from Zach? A maiden test century from the England batsman. Peter will have more on a dominant performance.
Hello, we've got plenty of summer heat across central parts of Europe, but over towards the northwest, well, we're still looking at some rather lively weather. Bands of cloud continue to swirl their way in from the Atlantic. Deep area of low pressure, this one, more the sort of weather you'd expect in the autumn. We'll see these showers, longer spells of rain, gradually getting drifted away as we go on through into the weekend. So things will gradually quieten down. That's the remnants of what was Storm Ellen. That cold front, that's making its way further southwards and eastwards. We'll see wetter weather gradually making its way over towards the Baltic states, Latvia, down across Poland, seeing some thundery downpours, then breaking the heat. That wet weather, those heavy showers, they will extend their way all the way into Austria and across the Alps. Still a blustery day for the northwest into the British Isles as we go on through Saturday. 22 Celsius in London, 25 in Paris. Much cooler than of late in Berlin at around 26 Celsius. And a similar picture as we go on through into Sunday. Wetter weather moves further southwards and eastwards. To the east of that, right across southern parts of it, through the Med, it's fine and dry. Lots of warm sunshine. That's the case too across northern parts of Africa. More heavy showers into the heart of Africa, a little further north than they should be, running all the way over to the west.
Welcome back. The headlines. Doctors in Russia say the opposition politician Alexei Navalny can be taken to Germany now for treatment. The critic of President Putin has been in an induced coma after he collapsed on a plane. His supporters say he was poisoned. Libya's opposing governments have both ordered ceasefires. The pause in fighting from the UN-backed administration in Tripoli and its rival in Tobruk could possibly create some space for negotiations. And the head of the US Postal Service has denied claims he's been trying to undermine mail-in voting for this year's presidential election. It's after concerns cost-cutting measures could mean millions of ballots would be uncounted. Well, nearly 22 million people tuned in for the final night of the Democratic National Convention, but the true number could be even higher as the tally doesn't include online viewers. The main event was Joe Biden's impassioned speech where he said the US will overcome a season of darkness after formally accepting the Democratic Party's nomination in the presidential race. Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher has more on this now from Wilmington in Biden's home state of Delaware.
I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America.
32 years after he first ran for president, Joe Biden is now the Democratic candidate, the last man standing in what was a large field.
But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president.
And now he will face Donald Trump in November, a man he's previously described as out of his depth, incompetent and racist, but a man he criticised without ever using his name in his speech.
And the choice could not be more clear. No rhetoric is needed. Just judge this president on the facts. 5 million Americans infected by COVID-19. More than 170,000 Americans have died. By far the worst performance of any nation on earth. More than 50 million people have filed for unemployment this year.
The acceptance was moved to an arena in his home state of Delaware. It was delivered to an empty room with family watching backstage. A nearby stadium was converted into a drive-in theatre to allow people to watch the speech on a big screen from the socially distanced safety of their cars. And the Democratic challenger told the country he knows being the guy who is not Donald Trump isn't enough to win.
As president, the first step I will take will be to get control of the virus that has ruined so many lives. Will we be the generation that finally wipes out the stain of racism from our national character? I believe we're up to it. I believe we're ready.
And he promised a different foreign policy in a Biden White House.
I'll be a president who will stand with our allies and friends and make it clear to our adversaries the days of cozying up to dictators is over.
The final speech at a convention is normally marked with huge cheers and traditionally a balloon drop. This was a different ending for what has been a different kind of convention. So Joe Biden has finally convinced the Democratic Party he should be the presidential candidate. Normally after the convention, the candidate hits the campaign trail, crisscrossing the country, but because of COVID, that can't happen this time round. But still, he has 11 weeks to convince the country that what he put on display in his speech, his vision, his policies, even his personality, is what America needs now. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Wilmington, Delaware.
Now, the number of wildfires in California has more than doubled in the past day. Around 560 blazes are now being fought. The state is seeing its most fires started by lightning in nearly 2 decades, with nearly 12,000 strikes adding to the total. 6 people have been killed, with dozens injured, and 175,000 people forced from their homes.
By tomorrow, maybe, I'll know more, but pretty much I'm thinking we're going to lose the house.
I'm really worried because if it burns down the next few days, I don't have a place to live.
Now, Greenland lost so much ice last year that it could force scientists to rethink their worst-case scenario for climate change. A new study says a record-shattering 532 billion tons of ice melted in 2019. That's around 66 tons of ice for each person on Earth. It amounts to more than 532 trillion litres of water, although Greenland could recover some of its ice sheet through fresh snowfall. But it's already having an effect on our oceans. Last year's melt added 1.5 millimetres to global sea levels. That doesn't sound like a lot, but if it goes on at the same rate, 30 million people could be affected by coastal flooding at the end of this century. If Greenland lost all of its ice, sea levels will rise by around 6 metres, which would redraw the world's coastlines. Well, Ingo Sangsgen is a geoscientist at the Alfred Wegener Institute, and he led the analysis on this in this report into the ice loss, and joins me live now from Bremerhaven, Germany. So really some shocking numbers we were looking at there that you will be very familiar with in this report, a record amount of ice lost in 2019. Did scientists predict this could happen?
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. So we already knew from weather data and also from field expeditions that 2019 was a warm summer with a lot of melt in Greenland. The satellite data we analyzed then finally gave proof that 2019 set a new record in terms of mass loss. So we were surprised to some extent, yes, because the previous mass loss record in 2012 that had been considered like a event of a century, repeated just within 7 years.
What about that worst case scenario about the entire ice sheet melting? Is that something that could happen?
It is definitely something that could happen, but it may take millennia to really disintegrate the ice sheet to a large extent. So our study rather shows that we have substantial ice loss in Greenland. A large part of this caused by melting, and this is closely connected to temperature. So every fraction sort of we save in terms of Arctic warming, we will get back in terms of less sea level rise and also the risks that are coming with it.
Tell me more about those risks if this ice loss from Greenland continues to accelerate at the present rate.
I think based on our study, we don't have to revise our projections that are sort of that sort of show that Greenland could contribute something like 10 centimeters by the end of the century. So obviously, a lot of coastlines will be affected, and as you have pointed out, 30 million people could be affected directly by this sort of sea level rise. But you should keep in mind it's not only Greenland, which is a sea level contributor. We also have the Arctic glaciers. We also have Antarctica, and also the thermal expansion of the ocean that is related to global warming also contributes to sea level rise.
What do you advise governments to do?
Well, so far, on a global scale, CO2 emissions keep increasing. So the planet is warming and temperatures in the Arctic are rising disproportionately. So we see summer temperatures that are rising 1.5 times faster than the global average. So, and if we continue on this pathway, we will see something like 4 centigrade higher temperatures than today in the Arctic. So, yeah. But so I would advise to limit CO2 emissions, limit warming, which will then keep the Arctic at a lower temperature. But, you know, melting and sea level rise is not necessarily the best indicator for the effectiveness of climate politics. So we know the ice sheet, even if we stop warming the Arctic right now, the ice sheet will lose mass for some time.
Well, thank you very much for shedding some more light on that analysis in that report for us. Ingo Sangsgen, a geoscientist, joining us there from the Alfred Wegener Institute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Well, now Turkey has announced its biggest ever discovery of natural gas. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is saying 320 billion cubic meters have been found in the Black Sea, and that the area's actual reserves could be even larger. It comes at a welcome time for Turkey's struggling economy. Energy imports cost $41 billion last year. President Erdogan wants the gas to be extracted and used as soon as 2023, when Turkey marks 100 years since becoming a republic. And he hopes to find more reserves, actually, in Turkey's controversial explorations in the Mediterranean.
We've been making concerted efforts over the past years. Both exploration vessels will be doing the same in the Mediterranean Sea. Both vessels have drilled 9 wells in both the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. By the grace of God, we found this big discovery, and I'm certain that we will have similar good news from the Mediterranean.
But there have also been warnings that it could take up to a decade to actually extract the gas. The exploration took place in the Black Sea off the north coast of Turkey, and analysts are saying that the reserves won't necessarily transform Turkey's fortunes, but will still provide a boost to the economy.
This is not the game changer, but this can be the beginning of something that will boost and add a very well and a very much needed boost to the Turkish economy. So what we are seeing, because the reserve could only serve Turkey, for example, for 6 years, it is not as big, but it can be the injection in the economy, the flow of cash in the economy that Turkey is eagerly looking for the last few years.
Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador swept to power in 2018 after promising to wipe out corruption. But now his own brother has been implicated in a scandal after footage showed him accepting a wad of cash. John Holman has more on this now from Mexico City.
This is the brother of Mexico's president receiving an envelope stuffed with cash in a restaurant. Money purportedly donated to Andrés Manuel López Obrador's political movement before he was elected.
I've got $26,000 here.
It's caused controversy. President López Obrador ran on a promise to wipe out corruption.
Just to be clear, this video doesn't prove that anything illegal happened, but it does raise serious questions. For example, was this money declared to Mexico's electoral authorities? And most importantly, where did it come from? If this was public money from any area of government, then this is illegal.
Latinos, the media outlet that published the videos, claims that David León, the man handing over the envelope, mentions the government of Chiapas, although that audio is not included.
The idea is to support. That's the goal.
President López Obrador said he didn't know about the money, but that it could have been lots of small donations that León had collected.
I can tell you that the people supported me. I had a bank account where they deposited money to keep the party going. And that's where I got my salary. That happened for years.
Context is important here. The videos come out just as López Obrador's Attorney General is investigating a corruption case that could implicate 3 of the president's predecessors. Video's been leaked of alleged bribes there too, and the president's critics say he's using the case for political gain, not justice. In turn, he claims this new video is their retaliation.
The aim is this, to damage the government.
It does seem like a war of corruption videos, and Marco Fernandez, part of a government watchdog, says there's only going to be one impact.
Unfortunately, this exchange of videos, is very likely that is going to reflect in a lower trust of citizens toward institutions, the erosion of these institutions, lower confidence in democracy, and greater insatisfaction among citizens.
And that loss of public trust is only likely to deepen as the politicians fight it out on social media. John Holman, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
Well, now to developments in Thailand. The government has started arresting the organisers of massive student anti-government protests. Officials have warned they are preparing for an escalation. Al Jazeera's Scott Heidler reports from Bangkok.
The month-old anti-government protest was founded, fronted and organised by Thai students from high schools to universities.
I want democracy and equality, where there's no difference whether one person has a higher social status than the other.
Earlier in the week, just after high school class dismissal, hundreds showed up in front of the Ministry of Education, asking for the minister to resign and for reform of the education system, less authoritarian, more democratic. This after students said they were prevented from showing their support for the movement on campuses, like using the three-finger salute, a symbol of the protest, or wearing ribbons, a sign of solidarity. Thailand's education minister, Natapan Teepsuan, came out to speak to the protesters, the first direct engagement from a top government official.
Is this something that you think the top levels of government will continue to do, kind of maybe follow your lead?
It's not following my lead. I think it's the dialogue that I've had with the Prime Minister. And I think that by listening to them, we'll minimize the damage that will be done if there would be escalating, the level of protest.
The minister says that he and others in the government are willing to continue and expand discussions with the protesters. But there's a mixed message because more protest leaders are being arrested. And it's clear that the call by some of the protesters for an overhaul in the monarchy is a no-go subject. Free Youth is one of the first and largest groups to start protesting.
We have goals, demands and a dream. Our dream is to have a country that is ruled by a true constitutional monarchy like England, Japan, Denmark or Norway, where the monarchy is under the constitution and the highest power belongs to the people.
Although the movement is being driven by the students of this country, others are joining the gatherings, especially on weekends. And the main organizing groups have already started to plan for the next round of weekend protests in September. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
Local authorities in the Chinese capital are removing the requirement for people to wear masks outdoors. Beijing has been relaxing its coronavirus restrictions after nearly 2 weeks with no new cases. Katrina Yu has more.
A few months ago here in Beijing, it was difficult to find anybody on the street not wearing a mask, but increasingly that's not the case. China has not recorded any local transmissions of the coronavirus in the past 5 days, and health authorities are starting to relax restrictions. Starting on Friday, people will no longer have to wear a mask while they're outdoors walking or exercising. And many residents here say they are relieved, but some say that they will choose to continue to wear a mask.
Most people are still wearing masks now, so for safety, I decided to keep wearing it for a while.
I feel very safe now, especially this new regulation says you don't need to wear a mask outdoor anymore. I follow the message from the government.
This is the second time Beijing health authorities have relaxed mask-wearing guidelines. They were initially loosened in April, but returned in June following a second outbreak. Now, China's leaders say outbreaks in Beijing and the provinces of Xinjiang and Liaoning are under control, and society is largely returning to normal. In recent weeks, cinemas and entertainment venues have reopened, albeit with limited capacity. And starting in September, all schools and universities are set to reopen.
Still to come on the NewsHour. The LA Lakers turn on the razzle-dazzle in the NBA playoffs. The high-flying action is just ahead with Peter in sport. Now, there's growing controversy surrounding South Korea's most famous boy band. BTS has achieved worldwide fame, but the K-pop stars are facing questions about when they plan to do military service as required under law in South Korea. Rob McBride reports.
They are a global sensation, as evidenced by this record-breaking virtual concert, reaching an estimated 750,000 fans worldwide, defying the pandemic. As the most famous K-pop band, BTS has managed to connect to an audience far beyond South Korea.
Their lyrics is a bit different from typical K-pop boy band because the identity of BTS as a hip-hop band makes them tell about their own life history, their own experience, which can be shared by global youth who have had a very similar experience in their younger age.
Part of that life experience for young South Korean men includes this: compulsory military service. It's regarded as a duty that all men over 18 should be proud to fulfill and that no one should skip. But there is a provision to delay your military service until you're 28, if you're studying. And with the BTS band members well into their 20s, all of them have now enrolled in online courses, leading to suspicions they're putting off their service for as long as they can. It's helped fuel a debate about whether K-pop stars should get an exemption. Often adored and hounded by fans wherever they go, the stresses of K-pop stardom are well known. And it's argued they contribute to South Korea's prestige abroad. Prominent sports stars like Tottenham football player Son Heung-min get an exemption if they win international tournaments. Son did just a few weeks of basic training. And BTS fans have petitioned the presidential office for their idols to be granted the same exemption.
still a controversy goes on. But in my opinion, if actually the people accept BTS contribute, to the raise up the Korean, the reputation, I think actually the president would, agree, and then they wouldn't, go to the military service.
Whichever way it goes, it's a controversial decision, balancing the need for fairness with a recognition that BTS are more than just another band of boys. Rob McBride, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
Peter's here now with the sport.
Mariam, thank you so much. Sevilla are celebrating 6 of the best. The Spanish Kings have extended their record run of Europa League football titles after beating Inter Milan 3-2 in Cologne. Luke de Jong was one of their heroes with 2 goals in a thrilling first half that ended at 2-2. Romelu Lukaku was hero and for Inter. He gave the Italian club the lead from the penalty spot before contributing to Sevilla's winner, deflecting Diego Carlos' spectacular scissor kick into his own net. Manchester United captain Harry Maguire is expected to appear in a Greek court on Saturday after a brawl on the holiday island of Mykonos. The world's most expensive defender was arrested after the late-night incident between 2 groups of tourists. Police say 3 British nationals face charges of verbal abuse and physical violence against police, plus attempted bribery. Greek state TV says 27-year-old Maguire's brother and a friend have also been arrested. Barcelona's new coach, Ronald Koeman, has been in charge for only a few days, but he's wasted no time in building his coaching staff. The Dutchman has appointed Henrik Larsson as an assistant. Larsson spent 2 years with Barcelona from 2004, winning the Champions League, 2 La Liga titles and the Spanish Super Cup. He played with Koeman at Dutch club Feyenoord as well. Zach Crawley has hit his first test ton to put England in a dominant position after the first day of the 3rd and final cricket test against Pakistan in Southampton. The 22-year-old is unbeaten on 171, having scored more than half of England's runs. He's put on a partnership of 205 with Jos Buttler to take his team to 332 for 4 at stumps. Buttler is on 87 not out. Meanwhile, England lead the series 1-0.
To find the gap and to run to and then come back, and now I got my first test 100. It was it was all a bit of a blur. I could see the lads up on the balcony, and I was trying to keep it calm, but inside I was absolutely buzzing, and it's great to be out there with Josh. He played brilliantly today, and he was a very calm head for me out there and made it a lot easier for me.
Let's go to the first women's golf major of the year, the British Open, where Sweden's Daniela Holmqvist is in the lead. They're at the halfway mark at Royal Troon in Scotland, and Holmqvist is a shot clear. The 32-year-old hitting a 1 under 70 on Friday, and she's also the only player who is under par for the tournament. Promises to be a closely fought next 2 rounds. 15 players are within 4 shots of the leader. The LA Lakers have hit back in their NBA playoff series against the Portland Trail Blazers. Portland won the opening game, but the Lakers stars stepped up in Game 2. This was Anthony Davis setting up LeBron James for an alley-oop. And then James returned the favor to set up Davis, who finished with 31 points. The Lakers won by 23, with Portland's star Damian Lillard dislocating his index finger, and it's not known if he'll be able to play Game 3. In the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks also recovered from a rocky start to their series against the Orlando Magic. Giannis Antetokounmpo scored 28 as they won by 15 to tie things up at 1 game each. The NHL ice hockey playoffs continue in Canada, and the New York Islanders have won their Eastern Conference first-round series against the Washington Capitals. Anthony Beauvillier scored twice in a 4-0 win in Game 5, and that sealed the series victory 4-1. It means the season is over for the Capitals, who were the Stanley Cup champions back in 2018. And the Dallas Stars are also into the second round after a fight-back win over the Calgary Flames. They were 3-0 down, but came back to win 7-3 and win the series 4-2. The Stars will now face the Colorado Avalanche. The reigning NFL champion Kansas City Chiefs have banned fans from wearing Native American-themed headdresses, face paint, or costumes. This follows the Washington NFL team dropping its Redskins name over accusations of racism.
The chiefs have been speaking with Native American communities, although they still have not made a decision on the arrowhead chop, in which fans use their arms in a chopping motion meant to simulate an enemy scalping. Coronavirus has caused more disruption in Major League Baseball this time. The New York Mets have postponed 2 of their games after 2 positive results in their camp. The last of the Mets' 4-game series at the Miami Marlins was called off an hour before it was due to start on Thursday. And Friday's game against the Yankees is also off to allow for more testing. Skiing's governing body has also had to make some tough decisions because of the pandemic. The FIS has confirmed that the World Cup tours will not travel to North America in late November for 2 weeks of competitions. It will affect race weeks in Lake Louise, Killington and Beaver Creek. That's where we'll leave the sports news for now. Mariam, it's back to you in London.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, that's it for the NewsHour, but I'll be back in a couple of minutes with a full bulletin of news for you. I'll see you in a bit.